Morning, folks. Hello. Go.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Okay, folks, we're going to go ahead and get started. Sorry, I was a little late getting here from my previous class. We ran over a little bit. So for those of you that were in the waiting room for far too long, my apologies. Today, Ms. J is going to be taking you through the basics of the House and the Senate. So we're going to kick it over to her so she can get started. If you have any questions, obviously you can use the chat room if you don't want to interrupt what she's sharing at the time, or you can unmute and ask questions as we go through it as well. So Ms. J, floor is yours.
Awesome, thanks guys. So I'm gonna see if I can share my screen. I can. So I am just starting off with the background and basics of Congress. So as we get a little bit more into the discussion, you guys have that background knowledge on it. And again, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask. I do not mind if you unmute and interrupt me. Or you can just put it in the chat as well. Where is the present? Okay. So we're looking at the legislative branch, and another word that you might have heard it called is Congress. So starting off, the congressional powers that are enumerated. And if you remember, enumerated powers come from the Constitution, and they are ones that are given to the federal government. And in this case, the branch of power that we're looking at is the legislative branch of Congress. So some of the powers that they get from the Constitution are the powers to tax and spend money, to regulate interstate commerce, and that is the commerce that happens between different states. So if you're trading goods, selling goods between like Ohio and Kentucky, that would be interstate commerce. Intrastate commerce is the trade that just happens within the state, but Congress can have the power to oversee and regulate the trade that happens between different states. And then laws concerning copyrights, patents, weight measures, and bankruptcy. And then admitting new states, declaring war, printing money, and running the post office. Let me see if I can move this. The impeachment process, the creating the federal judiciary, and implied powers. So that comes from the necessary and proper clause of the Constitution. We're going to get a little bit more into some of these powers, but I just wanted you again to be able to see the powers that are covered in the Constitution. I know we've taken a look at those in the past. So Congress has two parts. It has the House of Representatives and the Senate. And we're going to go over the differences of the both of those and kind of what their roles and responsibilities are. So starting off, the constitutional difference between the two. So the House is the one with the representatives that serve the 2-year terms, and there's 435 members. And this is how the amount of representatives you get is based off of your state's population. So the more people that live in the state, the more that you have representing you. So Ohio has 16 representatives. We are a pretty like middle-sized, larger state. So we've got 16 in the House of Representatives. And they can initiate all money and bill spending. So they are the group that would make laws and stuff on taxation and spending. And they're also the people that start the impeachment process. So I know this is kind of confusing. I myself had to like look into it to kind of figure it out. I know we heard a lot about impeachment in the news the past year, which is when I kind of looked into it. But the House is who recommends the impeachment. So they still have to vote on it, and then they can vote yes to impeach someone. And then afterwards, the person in the federal government who is impeached is then tried in the Senate. So that's the Senate's role in the impeachment process, is they try the person who was impeached. And so then moving on to the Senate, since we just kind of branched over to that, the Senate, they serve 6-year terms. So it's a little bit longer. Each state has 2 senators, so it's equal representation. We have 100 members in the Senate from each state. And their big thing is they give advice and consent. They get to look at the appointments that the president makes and treaties that the president makes, and they have to approve those and can offer consent on them as well, so they can kind of put their input. But the bigger thing is that they have to vote yes on the appointments and treaties. And I believe treaties are a 2/3 vote yes to get the treaty signed. So those are kind of like the 2 big differences in how the House and the Senate is set up. And then looking at their operational differences. And this just kind of means how they work on their day-to-day. So how bills are passed, how things are discussed, that sort of thing. So in the House of Representatives, it is very centralized and structured. They have very specific roles and leadership positions that people get into. The House of Representatives is where you guys are going to see specialized committees. And so that is groups of representatives. So let's say they have to propose things on the environment. A group of representatives are going to get together that have a little bit more of a background in the environment. They're going to make a committee. They're going to talk to lobbyists. They're going to do the research, and then they are going to present the bill. And that way it's just people who are more focused on certain things. The strong leadership comes from the Speaker of the House. It's very structured on how they're going to present bills. And they have what are called germane amendments only. So these are amendments that can only be discussed if they are relevant and have been brought up in the House before. So it just kind of keeps more of a structure on what they're going to discuss on the floor. The Senate is a little less centralized. It's more open to debate. That's where you guys will hear about, senators openly debating things on the floor. They don't have as many committees, so it's not as specialized. They can have non-germane amendments, so they can bring up new amendments that have not been introduced before and discuss things that have not been introduced before. And then they have the exciting thing of filibusters. And filibusters are the fun thing that happened in the Senate, which is a way for a senator to attempt or block and delay a passing of a bill or a Senate action. And so that's when a senator doesn't want something to happen, and they stand up in front of the Senate and they just talk and talk and talk and talk. The longest filibuster by a single person was in 1957. Senator Strawman Thurmond, he gave a 24-hour filibuster against the Civil Rights Act in 1957. And the rules for filibusters are pretty strict. They have to stay standing, they cannot leave the Senate floor, and they can only have water and milk with them, and they can't go to the bathroom. They can go to the bathroom if they can convince someone to ask them a question, and while they're asking a long question, they can go, but that means you have to get people on your side for the filibuster. So it's a big commitment to stand up there. But the reason they do this is because you can get something passed by just a majority vote, but to end a filibuster, you have to have what's called a cloture vote. And so that's a vote cast by 2/3 of the members of Senate to limit the time of the filibuster. So you have to get more than the majority together and in the consensus that they want this filibuster to end. So they have to get more people on their side than just what would have been the majority to vote yes on a bill. They have to get now 2/3 to stop the cloture or to pass the cloture vote. So that's kind of why that's done. But I'm sure you've heard that a lot. That's the thing that's they're kind of exciting, kind of fun to hear about. And then next, the organization. So these are the people that you hear a lot about in the House and Senate. And they just are they've got very specific roles on what they can do. And so the Speaker of the House is in the House of Representatives, and that comes from the majority party in both the House and they always come from the majority party. And they just kind of act as the leader of the House. They're the presiding officer. They are also third in line to the president. So they are pretty high up. If for some reason the president and then the vice president could not take over, like let's say the president dies, the vice president also cannot take over, then it would be the Speaker of the House of Representatives. So they're third in line. And then just like how bills are going to be presented and who's going to speak. And then in both the House and the Senate, they have majority leaders. And I'm sure you've heard a lot about majority and minority. And what this means is the majority, there's always going to be one political party in the House, in both the House and Senate, that has more people. So majority is the political party that has more people in the House. The minority is the political party that has least in the House. So the majority leader just comes from the majority party, and they are both in the House and the Senate. The minority leader is in both the House and the Senate, and it is just the head that comes from the minority party. And they just kind of watch, they keep their parties on track. They are a main speaker for that party, and they just have a really big say in those debates. The whips are in both houses as well, and there is a minority whip and there is a majority whip, and they assist majority and minority leaders. They kind of stand in for them if they're not there, and they help keep making sure that people kind of vote party and stay alongside party lines. And then lastly, or the last two roles are just in the Senate. So that's the president pro tempore, and that is the person who is the longest serving record from the majority party. And they fill in for the vice president if the vice president is not there. So the vice president technically is the president of the Senate. They vote if there's a tie because the Senate has an even number of people. They recognize people to speak. And they just kind of preside over the Senate. Well, the vice president, travels around a lot with the president. And so if the vice president cannot be there, that's when the president pro tempore steps in and kind of serves in that role. And then lastly, what we're going to look at is just the electing members of Congress. Oops. So, remember, for representatives, they come from districts of the states. So states draw these districts to vote for their state representatives. And state legislators are the ones that draw the districts, and they draw them every 10 years. So each of those districts in the state, depending upon how district lines are drawn, gets a representative in Congress. And then a big term I've heard, I know it's a very hot topic issue, it's a big term that's used a lot, it's called gerrymandering. And so gerrymandering is when states will specifically draw districts to help for a political advantage. So the easiest way for me to look at it is this kind of graph over here. It shows the little red cubes would represent, of the red political party, and in this one, the blue would represent the blue political party. So you can see that the two different ways that districts could be drawn would actually result in different winners of the district. And that would be a different person of a different political party representing you in Congress, depending upon how those district lines are drawn. And so a lot of people have issues with that because, they think, you know, if these lines were drawn differently, we would have different representations in Congress. So that is, again, that's like a hot button issue that comes along with electing members of Congress. I know that, you know, there's a lot of discussion in the media about Congress right now because we are going to be getting new people in these positions of power. We just had an election, so we've got a lot of new representatives. We'll be seeing, you know, new speakers of the House, new vice presidents, things like that. So it's going to really change the dynamics of Congress. And I think we're going to get more into that in this class. But does anyone have any questions over that? No? Okay. Well, I'm going to hand it back over to Mr. V so he can start on the rest of the lesson on Congress.
I'll take this one, Brett.
Fine, go right ahead.
All right, so just to reiterate what Miss J taught you very well was we got an assignment for you. It's just a card sort that you're going to do on Desmos, okay? I'll show you my screen so you can see how this is going to work. Let's see, yes. Okay, so under classwork on our classroom page, under Zoom meeting, there's House versus Senate, classwork House versus Senate. Okay, it'll take you to a web page. It's a Desmos activity. Sign in with your Google account. Enter your name. Make sure you put your name on there. Don't put nicknames. Put your real names. And then what you'll do is we've got the House and the Senate. Okay, and then you'll under each one make 2 columns. Under each one, put the right statement. Okay, so which one has 2-year terms? I'll give you that one. That's the House of Representatives. So you drag that underneath House of Representatives. Okay, so go through the rest. You'll have, you know, basically 2 columns with, you know, with that one with the House and one with the Senate. Okay. Now, when you are finished with this, you can exit out. It'll automatically freeze your screen. And when we grade it, we'll be able to see what your last screen was. So, you know, you don't need to worry about taking a screenshot or hitting a save button or anything like that. It automatically does it for you. Okay. This is for points. So make sure that you guys get this done. And then as you work through this, if you have questions, just unmute yourself and ask a question or throw it in the chat room and we'll do our best to answer that. Okay, get that done now. And then that'll be for 25 points. All right, good luck.
Okay, I realize some of you are still working. Again, if you remember from Mr. Ficker's activity explanation, the last screen on Desmos, when you get done with your listing, when you are done with that, you can exit out because it freezes the last screen. Okay, so we will be able to see what your finished product is when you are done. Correct, Mr. Ficker? Am I correct in that statement?
Yes, you are correct, Mr. V. And I got to say, Chloe Wilson, you have completed the activity and your last screen showed me that you got it all correct. So congratulations.
So bottom line is, folks, you know, this was kind of the class session today. As we come up on the end of the class, I did want to make a couple of mentions about what's going on currently in our government. A number of students have reached out and asked questions about what's going on with the presidential election and the transition and whatever else. Where we stand right now is that Donald Trump's legal team has pretty much exhausted most, if not all, of their legal challenges in many of these states. If you remember, right after the election, They were challenging results in Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, and Arizona. Most of those challenges have now pretty much been exhausted. The state of Michigan certified their election returns. Pennsylvania will do so pretty much within a day or two. Georgia did it last week. There are still legal challenges, as is his right as running for office. He has the right to ask questions about the process. He has the right to ask for recounts. In Wisconsin, they had to pay for it. So they're allowed to ask for it, but they have to pay for it. The high irony is not only did the Trump campaign pay about $3 million for the recount actually came back telling him that Joe Biden not only won, but he won by more votes. So that's kind of a kick in the pants to your theories about election fraud when you ask for a recount and it actually comes out less in your favor. So bottom line is there are people out there that are still a little disenfranchised with the system. And while it's not necessarily bad to ask questions and demand answers about the process, the people in charge of the process have been saying, look, we have had observation, we've had the right people in the right places, we've done everything by the election laws of our state, because remember, each state holds their own election. So right now it's looking like it's pretty much exhausted to the point where when the Electoral College meets here in a couple of weeks, they're going to meet on the 20th. And the way that happens is they meet in the state capitals of individual states. So since Ohio voted for Donald Trump, 18 Republican electors will meet in Columbus to cast their votes officially for Donald Trump for the state of Ohio. The same thing will happen in other states. What happens when Michigan and Georgia and Pennsylvania certify their election returns is it means it signals to the Democratic Party in those respective states that they can form up their electors. And so, for example, in Pennsylvania, there are 20 Electoral College votes since it's a winner-take-all system. All 20 of those are going to be Democratic electors who will meet in Harrisburg, which is their state capital, to vote specifically for Joe Biden. And the final electoral count right now, as it stands, is 306 to 232, which is the exact same tabulation from 2016. It's just flipped. So that means Donald Trump, when he was saying, oh, I won 306, I won the Electoral College, it was a landslide. Well, technically speaking, so did Joe Biden. So Joe Biden, and right now Joe Biden in the popular vote, which remember doesn't count for the actual election, but goes a long way towards forming what is known as your mandate, which is the power coming into office. Joe Biden right now has almost 80 million votes, which is a record. We've never had that. And, Donald Trump roughly is around 74 million. So you're talking about a 6 million differentiation between the two on the popular vote. So this election is pretty much done. The popular vote or the Electoral College will meet on the 20th. Those will then be certified by Congress starting off the new session. As Ms. J was pointing out, they are going to get some new leadership. When they're swearing in the new leadership and when they're swearing in the new members, they will also certify the election returns as well. That's when state elections actually physically become a national election, when the Congress votes to certify. And then after that, about 17 days later, Joe Biden will take the oath of office. Now, if you paid attention to the news over the weekend, he might have to take the oath of office in a boot because he broke his foot the other day playing with his dog. That is something Mr. Ficker would do. So Ficker has something very in common with Joe Biden. No offense, Ficker, but it's true. Bottom line, he has some hairline fractures in his foot, so he might actually be in a boot or on crutches, but on January 20th, he will take the oath of office as president. That's kind of where we stand. I don't want to drag this on too much because I know you have other classes to get to. If you have any questions about this, what I just talked about, or any of the assignments, you can certainly stay after and ask. You can always use email. This is our last live session for the week. You don't have to make plans to come in tomorrow. We'll go to full remote tomorrow, which means there will be some assignments that Ms. J has put together on something known as iCivics. So we will have that posted, ready for you to go. That'll be your assignment for the week. It literally is playing video games, so it's not going to be too different than what many of you are doing anyway. It's just on a different format, and you're actually learning from it. So please make sure you log back on tomorrow to get those assignments and understand what you need to do for the rest of the week. But again, if you have any questions, hang back. Otherwise, you are off to your fourth bell. And thanks for coming in, folks. We have tabulated who was here for the extra credit points. So again, you're off to your fourth bell. Have a great day and a great rest of the week. Stay healthy and stay safe. Okay, welcome into class today, folks. In the interest of getting started here on time and giving you plenty of time to get done with the activity we have for you today, Ms. J will be taking you through a PowerPoint, a quick little synopsis over the differences between the House and the Senate within Congress, basic overview of that material. Please pay attention as you're going through because your activity will be directly related to that. Obviously, if you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to unmute your microphone and ask, or to use the chat function. But Ms. J will be sharing her screen here momentarily. If you have questions about anything pertaining to the class, you can either wait until after the presentation, or you can ask through email or the chat as well. I'll be monitoring that as the presentation is going on. So Ms. J, the floor is yours.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so let me get my screen shared. So I am going to be going over just the basics of Congress, so you guys can do this great activity at the end of class. So starting off, oops, I didn't mean to start it. I was just moving my little screen so I can see. Okay, so we're looking at the legislative branch, and another word for this is Congress. And I just wanted to start off because Congress has powers given to them by the Constitution. And if you remember, those are called enumerated powers. And we've looked at those, but I just wanted to cover again what they're actually able to do. So they are able to control taxing and spending of the money. They're able to control and regulate interstate commerce. And if you remember, interstate commerce is trade that happens between different states. So that would be trade that happens between like Ohio and Kentucky. That is what Congress can regulate. They don't regulate intrastate commerce. That is trade that just happens within a state itself. So like trade happening within Ohio would not be controlled between Congress. But as soon as it moves out and moves between different states, Congress has the power to regulate that. Any laws concerning copywriting, patents, weight measures, and bankruptcy, Congress is able to control. They admit new states. Congress can declare war, print money, and run the post office. Congress is in charge of the impeachment process, and we'll break down a little bit more in the next couple slides. They can create the federal judiciary, and they also have implied powers from the necessary and proper clause. Like I said, I know we've gone over these a lot, but I just wanted to cover them again so you could see the broad overview of all the congressional powers. So there are two parts of Congress. There is the House of Representatives and the Senate. And I wanted to break down the different roles and responsibilities of each of those so you can kind of get a better understanding how there's two parts of Congress within the legislative branch. So starting off, the constitutional difference. The House has a 2-year term and it has 435 members. And to be able to be eligible to be a representative in the House of Representatives, you have to be 25 years old. And the House is in charge of money and bills. So they're the ones that can start taxation and are in charge of spending. And they are elected through state population. So the bigger the state you are, the more representatives you're going to have. So Ohio is kind of like a medium to large state. We have 16 representatives. So like I said, the bigger the population, the more representation you will have in the House. And then the House is who initiates impeachment proceedings. So in order to be impeached, the House will look at the charges and decide whether or not to impeach a person in the federal government. So they have to have a majority vote yes to impeach a person. After they vote yes, then the impeached person moves to the Senate, and the Senate will try the person who is impeached to see whether or not the charges are true. So I was kind of confused about that. I know we've heard a lot about it in the news within the past year, so I just wanted to clarify. The House decides who is going to be impeached, they initiate those proceedings, and then it's taken to the Senate for the person to actually be tried. So then moving over to the Senate is a 6-year term. There's 100 members, so each state gets 2 members in the Senate. It doesn't matter how many people you have living in your state, every state has 2 members in the Senate. And the Senate is in charge of what is called advice and consent. And so they have to consent, which means they have to approve all appointments and treaties. For a treaty, it is a 2/3 vote, and then they have to vote yes on all the appointments that the executive branch of the president would make. So remember that the Senate is in charge of the appointments and the treaties. And to be a senator, you have to be 30 years old. Just wanted to put that in there as well. So some of the operational differences. So this is just kind of how you'll see things going a little bit differently between the House of Representatives and the Senate, just how they operate. The House of Representatives is very centralized and very structured. This is because they've got some very strong leadership. The way that bills are presented in here are a little bit different. It's a lot less debate focused and discussion focused. It is instead very centralized around committees. So that would be representatives who are really focused in a certain area. So let's say there's a group of we need to pass things on environmental issues. Representatives who have a lot of knowledge and background in that and are very passionate about that will get together and form a committee to solve that issue. They will then talk to lobbyists and experts and things like that, and then that committee will represent or present bills and lead the discussions on that. So it's a lot more specialized. It also has what is called germane amendments only. So that means amendments can only be presented if they have been brought up and are relevant before. So bills can only be presented if they've been discussed before. The Senate's a little bit different. It's less centralized, it's more open to debate. There's a lot more discussion. Non-germane amendments are allowed, so new things can be presented more. There's more discussion. It's less specialized it has less specialized committees. So yeah, it's just a lot more debate focused, which is where you get filibusters. And filibusters are kind of exciting. So what is a filibuster? A filibuster is when the Senate is trying to pass a bill or some sort of Senate action and the senator does not want that happening. So they can get up and they can stand on the Senate floor and just talk and talk and talk, and it can delay the passing of this bill or Senate action. So the longest filibuster to ever take place was in 1957. It was Senator Strom Thurmond, and he gave a 24-hour filibuster against the Civil Rights Act of 1957. And that's a really long filibuster because the rules for the filibuster are you have to stay standing on the Senate floor, you cannot leave the Senate floor, you can only have water or milk, and you can't go to the bathroom. The one time you can't go to the bathroom if you can get someone on your side to ask a question from the floor, and if they ask a long enough question, you can leave during that brief period of time, but that would mean you have to have people on your side for the filibuster. So it's a really long time to be standing there, not eating, just talking, trying to delay Senate action. And the reason this is done is because then the Senate has to pass what is called a cloture vote. And so a vote cast by 2/3 of the members of Senate to limit the time of the filibuster. And this makes it harder to pass an action then or a bill because typically it just takes a majority vote to pass something. However, if a filibuster is taking place, that means you have to increase it from a majority vote to a 2/3 vote in order to end the filibuster. So that's how that can be really successful for a filibuster, because you have to get more people on the side of we want this to end, we want this vote to be able to be cast on this. So it just takes more people and more support for something to be passed then. And so then going into the organization of congressional leadership positions. So each branch of Congress has each part of Congress has different kind of leadership positions, and then there are some that are relevant in both. So in the House of Representatives, it is led by the Speaker of the House, and the Speaker comes from the majority party. They are third in line to the president, and they just kind of preside over the House of Representatives. They get to decide when bills are going to be initiated. And our current Speaker of the House is Nancy Pelosi. And then next is the majority leaders. There are majority leaders in both the House and the Senate. Because what a majority leader is it's somebody who represents the majority party in both the House and Senate. That means that the political party, so either the Democrats or the Republicans, will have more people in both the House and the Senate. The political party with more people in it is the majority party. The political party with less people in it is the minority. So both the House and the Senate will have majority leaders. The Senate is the one that you hear a lot about. The majority leader is Mitch McConnell. So you'll hear a lot about him in the news, and he is very important. He speaks a lot for the House or for the Senate, but there is a majority leader in the House as well. There are also minority leaders in both the House and the Senate. So again, that is the person who represents the minority party. And they just kind of make sure that their party is staying on track, voting for things that the party supports, and just kind of overseeing those things. Whips are in both the House and the Senate because whips assist either the majority leader and the minority leader. So there's majority whips and minority whips. And they just kind of help keep the party in line, make sure people are voting along with party lines, and assist the majority and minority leaders if they are not there. And then the last two roles are only in the Senate. So starting off, the president pro tempore, that is the person who is the longest standing member of the Senate from the majority party. And they kind of fill in for the vice president when the vice president is not there. So the vice president is considered the president of the Senate. They are the tiebreaker vote. They get to decide when people are going to speak in the Senate, and they just, they preside over it. However, the vice president has a lot of duties assisting the president. They travel around. They're not in the Senate physically very often. So that is when the president pro tempore steps in and acts as that person while the vice president is gone. And then lastly, electing members to Congress. So states are drawn into districts, and then each of those districts gets a representative to represent them in the House. And the state legislators, so each individual state is in charge of drawing their districts every 10 years after the census. And this is a really hot button issue because of what it is called gerrymandering. And I'm sure that many of you have heard about gerrymandering in the news. I know a lot of people discuss it because it can very much affect the outcomes of an election. And so gerrymandering is what happens when districts are drawn for a political advantage. And so the easiest way for me to understand it is this little chart right here. So it shows that if this were a state right here, 60% of the state is red, 40% is blue. However, depending upon how districts are drawn, you can either get a blue winner for the state, even though it is only 40% blue because of the way that the districts can be drawn, or it can be drawn in a way that red wins. And so the way that districts are drawn can really affect the outcome of an election and affect who is going to be the representatives of certain districts based on how those districts are drawn. So even though, it is majority red, you could still end up with a blue winner of the state. So that's just something to be aware of. It's important to know since, your representatives will be representing your state and your interests in, the federal government. So does anyone have any questions over anything we covered? Okay, well then I will hand it back to Mr. Ficker so he can explain your next assignment.
Okay, so just to reiterate what Ms. J taught you, we've got an assignment for you on Desmos. Okay, I know you usually use Desmos with your math classes, but we've got something else for you here. It's a sorting activity. So I'm going to share my screen and let's see. Okay, so can you all see my screen? Okay, all right. So I'm sorry, I got like 5 screens open. I wanted to make sure I shared the correct one. Okay, so you'll go to your classroom page and you'll go to classwork, and under Zoom meeting classwork for the week, you'll see something called House versus Senate, okay? When you click on that, there's a link there. It takes you to this Desmos activity. Sign in with your Northwest account. And then make sure you put your name in there. Don't use any aliases. Use your real name. Click go. And then you've got these this activity where you're going to make two columns, basically. One is the Senate, and the other one is the House of Representatives. So you'll look at each of these, and each of these boxes will go under just one, either the House or the Senate. So we'll do the easy one for you. The 2-year terms, that is House of Representatives. So you drop that one under there. 6-year term is the Senate. Okay. So go through those, figure out which one they go to, House or the Senate. When you're finished, you don't need to save it. It automatically sends a screenshot or makes a copy of your last screenshot, and it saves it on the website. So when we go to grade it, we can see the last thing that you did. Okay. If you have any questions as you're going through this, either throw them in the chat room or just unmute yourself and ask a question, and we'll do our best to answer that. Okay, it's a graded assignment, so make sure you get that done today. Right now would be a good idea. Okay, all right, go ahead and get started on that. If you have any questions, again, use the chat room or just unmute yourself and ask a question. Michael, you got, I need you to switch the, wait a second. Yeah, so Michael, you've got the House of Representatives holds removal trials. Switch that one over to the Senate. And then,
All right.
and then the taxation bills, remember those start in the House. So switch those two.
All right. Thank you.
No problem. Hey, Shemaya, you got, everything's correct except for the number of members. Okay, you got those switched. So switch those between what you have for the House, flip it over to the Senate and vice versa.
Okay.
Hey, Seth, I see that you're logged in. Do you have any questions about the activity, like what goes where? Hey, Kiana, you've got, there's, let's see, I just had it in my head. Okay. You've got impeachment under the Senate. That one goes to the House. And then you got two other ones, hold removal trials and members can filibuster. Okay, those ones go under the Senate.
Okay.
Hey, Taylor, you got the ages wrong. Flip the ages, the one you have for the Senate and the House. Just flip those. Everything else looks okay so far.
Okay.
Okay, folks, we have about 10 minutes left in the class period. And in every period that I have today, I've been kind of going over where we're standing with the election. Since tomorrow we are going back to full remote learning and won't have class sessions like this. I did want to at least give an update as we come out of Thanksgiving break. Many of you probably had family gatherings through Zoom or possibly even at your house where politics came up and maybe people were a little less than friendly about it. So I'll just kind of give you a rundown of where we stand when it comes to the election and the transition between the Trump and Biden administrations. As it stands right now, a number of the states that were in contention, the ones that Donald Trump and his legal team have been questioning the results in, states like Georgia, Wisconsin, and Michigan, all three of those states have had a recount, have done extra work on their ballots, and basically have certified their election returns. Pennsylvania will probably do so within the next few days, Arizona as well. So the Trump legal team is kind of running out of options. They've lost a number of federal cases, a number of state cases. So many of them have been tossed out of court for lack of evidence. And the Trump legal team is saying, well, we've got hundreds of these affidavits, these signed affidavits, and the courts aren't listening to them. What an affidavit is, just so you're aware, an affidavit is a sworn statement, meaning if I was an election worker and I saw something happen, and I wrote it down and signed off that, yes, this is what I saw, they're not lying. They're telling you what they saw. Now, I think we can all agree that sometimes you see things and your perception of it is not the reality. And that's where the affidavits come into question. Is what they saw really election fraud, or can it be explained in other ways? So, for example, there was a guy who said in Michigan that the electronic voting machines were tabulating it wrong. The electronic voting machines were checked and they were not. So this guy who was saying, oh, well, it's shifting votes to the other candidate. You know, there were 600 Trump votes that all of a sudden went to Biden. There was a quick and easy explanation over what was happening with that system, if you will. So a lot of these things, like in Pennsylvania, there was a postal worker who signed an affidavit saying that they had messed around with postage dates. So if you drop off mail today, it's stamped. You guys have all seen that on letters that come in the mail. The stamp on the envelope is stamped by the post office to let you know what day it was received. not the day it's delivered, but the day it was received by the post office and processed. What these states like Pennsylvania said, hey, if you have it by November 3rd, if you have it postmarked by November 3rd, we'll still count it when we receive it. Even if we get it on November 7th, we're still going to count it as a legal ballot because you registered the vote before election day was done. So that was kind of the rules that they were operating under Pennsylvania law. Well, this postal worker was saying, hey, I was in a meeting where they were like, we're going to ignore the postage dates, we're going to backlog them. And the idea was, according to this postal worker, is if I'm working on November 4th, that I'm going to use November 3rd's stamp to kind of like backlog it, to make it look like it was registered on the day of election. That didn't happen. There were only 2 votes that were brought up that were maybe questionable as to whether or not they were stamped wrong, or the stamps were kind of fudged to the point where they couldn't really figure it out. So even if there was a little bit of shenanigans by a postal employee, it was only 2 votes in a state where there was a 60,000 vote difference between Biden and Trump. So a lot of this is kind of being explained away, where the affidavits may not be, they're not going to be necessarily lies, but they can be explained away by this is what you really saw. So basically what's happening is a lot of these judges are saying none of this is proving your claim that there's widespread voter fraud, that there's some calculated effort to try and steal the election. So, of course, over the weekend when I was driving around over by Westchester's Voice of America Park, there was this little rally of people out there with Trump flags and little signs that said "Stop the Steal." And I just kind of had to laugh at them because A, they're in Ohio, which voted for Trump. B, I don't know what their end purpose is at that point. I guess maybe call your elected officials and complain. I'm not sure, but bottom line is coming up here in the next few weeks, the Electoral College will meet. And by certifying these results, they're basically freeing up the political parties to choose their electors, which they've already done, and let their electors know that they can show up in the state capitol on December 20th and register their votes for their candidates. So on December 20th, there will be 18 Republican electors that meet in Columbus, Ohio, to register their votes for the president within the Electoral College. In Pennsylvania, if they certify their 20 Democrats, they will meet in Harrisburg and they will do the same thing for Joe Biden. So by the end of that day, the Electoral College will have tabulated their results. They will send them to Congress, and then Congress, as Ms. J kind of points out, they're going to be, as they come in, they're going to be swearing in their leadership, their new leaders, their new members. It's kind of the procedural thing that they do when they start off Congress, and then they're going to certify and they're going to take the state elections and make it into a national election by certifying the Electoral College returns. And for what it seems like right now, it will be 306 to 232, which is the exact same Electoral College count from 2016, weirdly enough, where Trump won. This time it will be 306 for Joe Biden, and Joe Biden will be the next president. And right now, as it stands, as the national popular vote, it looks like Biden has roughly 80 million, which is a record. And then Donald Trump has 74 million. So there's about a 6 million difference in the popular vote. While that doesn't mean anything for the actual election, it does mean something when it comes to mandate. And we'll talk about this when we hit the executive branch. Mandate is the power coming into office. Do you have the will of the people behind you, is basically what it comes down to. Biden can basically say, look, I had 6 million more votes total than the guy I beat, the sitting president. So that means 6 million more Americans wanted me over the other guy. And he can also point to the fact that it's a record, that more people showed up to vote for him than anybody else. So that's kind of what he's going to be playing up. Trump is going to play up that, well, it was razor thin in Georgia and Pennsylvania. And so the Republicans are going to say, well, you're not really that powerful of a president because you just barely won the election. So they're going to be arguing back and forth. Biden has already started his transition. The transition team is already up and running. They are meeting with Trump's administration officials on things like COVID, on things like foreign policy, on economic measures. Biden has already put forth a list of his nominees for his cabinet, his economic positions, economic advisors, I should say, his diplomats, all of that. He's working through what is a typical transition. So Biden is already acting like on January 20th, he will be taking the oath of office, which, as it stands right now, should be what happens. So on January 20th, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden will be sworn in as the vice president and president, respectively. There is some question, if you paid attention to the news, as to whether or not Joe Biden will be on crutches or in a boot, because he did break his foot this weekend. He broke his foot while playing with his dog. He is 78 years old. He's the oldest president we have ever elected. So he has to be a little careful. And he obviously was not this weekend. He pulled a Ficker and broke his foot while playing with his dog. Not that Mr. Ficker has done that, but we can all kind of envision Ficker actually doing that. If it's going to happen to anybody, it's Mr. Ficker, especially if you've met his dogs. One of them is insanely stupid, and he will freely admit that. Correct, Mr. Ficker?
He's fallen. My dog at stupid fell down the steps twice. And he also walked into a tree one time. So pretty dumb dog, but I love him.
Finn's the nice one. The other one is not. Don't get Ficker started on that, the other one. So bottom line is that's kind of where we stand electorally and politically moving forward. So as you start moving into the holiday season and you have your families coming together, if you kind of want to know what's going on closer to that and you're kind of worried about people yelling and screaming and you want to participate, maybe you can reach out to Ficker, Miss J, myself, and we can kind of explain what's going on within the government. But that's kind of where we stand right now. If you have any questions, you can certainly stay behind, but we are coming up on lunchtime. Your lunch break is coming up here, so I don't want to take too much of your morning on that. So again, if you have your Desmos activity done, again, you just have to get to the end. At the very end, the screen will freeze on your last activity and it will submit. We'll be able to check it. So you should be fine on that. You are getting extra credit for showing up today, so we do appreciate that. We have entered in the attendance, but the extra credit will be on top of your grades from the activities. Now, tomorrow, we switch to full remote, which means you will not be seeing us per se. We'll have office hours, but you will not have traditional class like this. So you don't have to worry about that tomorrow. But there will be an assignment that Miss J will post that will be basically playing video games. It's educational video games, but you will have some iCivics games to play. There will be some choice in the matter as to what you do and how you do it, but that'll be the assignment for the rest of the week is logging on and basically playing video games. So it's not too bad. So please check in. If you have questions, obviously you can email at any time or swing by our office hours, which will be posted on Google Classroom. Other than that, if nobody else has anything to add or any questions, you are free to go, folks. Have a great day. Stay safe and stay healthy.
What do I do? Like, I feel like I'm done with my assignment, but it's like, it's not letting me do anything. I'm like, I don't know if I'm done or not.
You want me to check your screen? I can check your screen to see if you've done it correctly or not. But Taylor, it also, whatever you did last, it saves automatically for you. So don't worry about saving it or sending it to me. I can see what you did.
Oh, okay.
You want me to double check it for you?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, let's see. Okay, let's see. Are you still on, Taylor? Are you still on?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you see that I moved 2 out of there for you?
Oh, wait, I gotta. Which ones did you switch?
I just moved them to the middle. Impeaches president and federal judges, starts all taxation bills.
Oh, no, I didn't see. It's not moving for me.
Okay. But those 3, you had them under Senate, and they actually put that one there for you. There's 2, impeaches the president and starts all taxation bills. You had those under the Senate. Those actually go under the House.
Okay.
Okay. Just move those there, and you can log out at that point because it'll say what you did.
Okay.
Okay.
So you said taxation and what?
starts out taxation bills and impeaches the president and federal judges.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, so Douglas, I noticed that you finished reading this book. How much
Yes.
did you skip?
I didn't skip a lot, honestly. I take it back. I skimmed the beginning of his life up until he read or did the speech at the 2004 Democratic Convention.